I was hauling a bag of mulch out of my truck when she strutted across the street like she owned the pavement. Clipboard in hand, sunglasses too big for her face, and that familiar scowl that screamed HOA trouble. Her name was Cheryl Zimmerman, president of the Maple Creek Homeowners Association and self-declared queen of the cul-de-sac. "You can't just live here without approval," she barked, planting herself between me and my front steps. I blinked. "Excuse me, this home is under HOA management. You need to register with the board. We don't allow squatters." I let the bag of mulch drop to the sidewalk. "Squatter?" she sniffed, flipping through the papers on her clipboard like she was auditioning for a courtroom drama. "This home belongs to the HOA. You're not listed as a tenant or an owner. You're trespassing." My blood pressure jumped 5 points. "Lady, I'm the original owner. I built this place 20 years ago." She squinted at me, clearly not processing. "That's impossible. This property is under lease by the HOA to one of our members." "Camille Devers, you're on her lease." I tilted my head. "Camille? You mean the same Camille who moved in last February? Blonde, loud, always parks her car across 2 spaces. Cheryl narrowed her eyes. "That's none of your business. What matters is she's a tenant." "You are not." I pulled my wallet from my pocket and slapped my ID into her hand. "Read the name on that. August Holloway. Check the deed. It's filed in my name." "I own this house and I never leased it to anyone." Cheryl glanced at the ID, then back at me, her mouth twitching like she'd eaten a lemon. "That's not what our records show." "Then your records are trash," I said, "because this house has been in my name since 2003. I moved to Boston for a year, rented the place out through a property manager, and came back 6 months ago. Camille never signed a lease with me." She didn't reply, just huffed and stormed back across the street like a cat that had been sprayed with a hose. That night, I checked my mailbox and found a violation notice from the HOA citing unauthorized occupancy. I laughed out loud. Cheryl was doubling down. The next morning, I called the county records office. 30 minutes later, I had copies of the deed, title, and every tax bill for the last 2 decades, all in my name. I scanned them, printed them, and stapled them to the front door like a manifesto. Let Cheryl try to argue with that, but she didn't show up. Camille did. She banged on my door just before lunch, her acrylic nails clicking against the glass. "You need to leave," she shouted. "I pay rent to the HOA. This is my house now." I opened the door slow. "You pay rent to Cheryl." "Yes, monthly. It's on my lease." I leaned against the frame. "Camille, if you're paying rent to Cheryl and she's not the owner of this house, you've been scammed." She paled. "What?" I stepped aside and handed her a copy of the deed. "This house, mine, always has been. Cheryl's been leasing out my home behind my back." Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. "Yeah," I said. "I think it's time we both had a little chat with the sheriff." Camille stood frozen on the porch, still gripping the paper like it might disappear if she blinked. Her lips parted again, but I walked past her down the steps and pointed toward my truck parked at the curb. "Get in," I said. "We're going downtown. You've been conned, and I'm not letting this get swept under the rug." She didn't argue, just followed in silence. The ride to the sheriff's office took 20 minutes. Neither of us spoke until we were standing in front of the desk sergeant. "I need to report fraud," I said, laying the deed down. "And she's a witness." The deputy flicked through the paperwork, eyes narrowing. "You're saying the HOA leased your property without your consent?" "I never authorized a lease," I said firmly. "I never even met this woman until yesterday." Camille, still pale, added, "I've been paying rent every month to Cheryl Zimmerman. She told me the HOA took over the property." I signed a lease through her and paid a $2,000 deposit. The deputy let out a low whistle and picked up the desk phone. Within minutes, a detective named Alvarez joined us in a back conference room where we laid everything out. He asked for copies, which I handed over: deed, tax records, even the certified letter I'd received from the property manager confirming they hadn't handled this lease or any tenant since I returned. Camille, now visibly shaking, handed over the lease Cheryl had given her. Alvarez held it up to the light, then turned it over. "This isn't even notarized," he muttered. "And the signature line just says Maple Creek HOA, no registered agent, no legal identification." "She told me that was standard," Camille said quietly. He looked between us. "This is serious." If what you're both saying is true, then she's been running an unauthorized rental racket off properties she doesn't own. That's felony-level fraud, possibly even racketeering if there are others. There are others, I said. I know at least 2 homes on my street that changed hands recently. Neither were listed publicly. Alvarez leaned back in his chair. Then we'll need a full list of properties under the HOA's management and the names of all current tenants. If this is systemic, we're talking multiple counts of fraud, unlawful leasing, and possibly wire fraud if she's been collecting payments digitally. Camille looked like she might vomit. I want to press charges, I said. And I want her removed from any position of authority over this neighborhood. You'll need to file a formal affidavit, Alvarez said, and I'll need a sworn statement from your witness. We spent the next 2 hours filling out paperwork. By the time we left, Camille was a different person, quieter, more cautious. At the truck, she turned to me. I didn't know, she said. I really thought she was legit. I believe you, I said, but she played you. Now we're going to stop her from doing it to anyone else. Back at Maple Creek, I didn't head home. Instead, I walked straight to house number 32, where a man named Dennis had moved in just 3 months ago. He was out front trimming hedges and gave me a wary glance as I approached. You ever meet the seller when you bought this place? I asked. He wiped his hands on his jeans. No, I dealt with Cheryl. Something about the HOA managing foreclosures. Sounded weird, but the price was good. My stomach dropped. She didn't have the authority to sell anything. You might not even legally own this house. He stared at me, blinking. You're joking. I shook my head. I'm working with the sheriff's office now. You should come down and talk to them. He nodded slowly. I knew it felt off. The contract she gave me was typed in Word. There wasn't even a lawyer involved. That's not just shady, I said. That's criminal. Over the next few days, word spread. More residents came forward. 3 had leases, 2 had purchase agreements, and 1 poor guy was told he was buying into a co-op. Cheryl was spinning lies tailored to each person, using her HOA title like a badge of legitimacy. Alvarez called me back the following week. We got a search warrant executed this morning. Found forged documents, fake lease templates, and a ledger showing over $70,000 in unaccounted payments. She was pocketing it all. Looks that way, he said. We're bringing her in for questioning now. And we've frozen all HOA accounts pending a forensic audit. I hung up and walked outside just in time to see Cheryl being loaded into the back of a cruiser, her hands cuffed behind her back. Her eyes locked on mine, full of venom. You did this, she spat. You did it to yourself, I said. I just made sure you didn't get away with it. The neighbors had started gathering some filming, others murmuring. Camille stood beside me, arms folded. She told me I was her favorite tenant, she said, almost to herself. She told everyone what they needed to hear. That's how cons work. The HOA board, such as it was, collapsed within a week. Turns out Cheryl had manipulated every vote, forged proxies, and appointed people who didn't even live in the neighborhood. The county stepped in and placed the association under administrative review. An interim trustee was assigned to assess the damages and start the process of unwinding Cheryl's mess. I attended the first emergency meeting, where the trustee read aloud a list of Cheryl's infractions. Embezzlement, wire fraud, forgery, criminal impersonation, and illegal property transfers. Every charge stuck. She was being held without bail. Camille gave a tearful statement about her experience, and Dennis followed with his own. More neighbors stood up, one by one, each revealing how Cheryl had manipulated them, silenced dissent, or threatened bogus fines if they asked too many questions. When it was my turn, I stood and looked around at the room. She tried to erase me, I said. Tried to steal my identity, my home, and my rights. But she didn't count on someone fighting back. That's the thing about bullies, they always assume you'll roll over. The room broke into applause. Later that night, I sat on the porch with a cold beer, watching the sun dip behind the pines. A few houses down, Camille was loading boxes into a rental van. She glanced over and gave a small wave. Where you headed? I called. Back to my sister's place in Garden Hill, she said. I'm done with HOAs. I raised my bottle. You and me both. She gave a tired laugh and climbed into the driver's seat. As the van rolled down the street, I turned back toward my house, and smiled for the first time in a long while. Justice had knocked, and this time, it kicked the damn door in. The day after Cheryl's arrest, I was awoken by the sound of a moving truck rumbling across the gravel street. I stepped onto my porch, coffee in hand, and watched as uniformed movers hauled furniture out of the rental house 2 doors down. A man in a navy windbreaker, probably in his early 60s, stood near the mailbox, arms crossed, watching them work. His expression was hard to read, somewhere between confusion and betrayal. I walked over. "You part of the cleanup crew or the fallout?" I asked. He gave a tired laugh. "Fallout. Name's Art. I bought this place in April. At least I thought I did." "You dealt with Cheryl," he nodded, eyes still on the movers. "She said the HOA had taken over properties that were abandoned during the downturn. Said I could buy directly from the association at a reduced rate. No escrow, no banks, just a certified check and some paperwork. Let me guess, you never got a title." His jaw tightened. "Just a quitclaim deed she handed over in a manila folder. I should have known better, but everything looked so official." I didn't need to ask where the check went. "Detective Alvarez might want to talk to you," I said. "They're compiling a timeline of everyone she duped." Art gave a slow nod. "Already filed a report yesterday. They told me I may not even have legal possession of this place." "That's probably true," I said. "But you're not the one they'll be coming after." He gave me a long look. "She's not going to weasel out of this, is she? Not unless she figures out how to walk through concrete walls." Later that afternoon, I got a call from a city administrator named Reva Park. She said she was with the Department of Municipal Oversight, assigned to review non-governmental residential boards that had received complaints of mismanagement. Cheryl's case had triggered something bigger. "I'd like to meet with you," she said. "In person, if possible." We agreed on the community center at the edge of the neighborhood. When I arrived, she was already there, seated at her round table with 3 manila folders open in front of her. Her blazer was rumpled, and she looked like she hadn't slept in a while. "You're August Holloway?" she asked. I nodded and sat down across from her. "This HOA's structure is unusual," she began, flipping through a stack of documents. "There's no charter filed with the state, no incorporation paperwork, nothing with the Secretary of Housing. It's like it was created out of thin air." She used the title to make herself look legitimate, I said. "People trusted it because it sounded official." "She exploited a legal gray zone," Reva said. "In this county, HOAs aren't required to register unless they manage common property or amenities. Cheryl created a fake governing body with no legal foundation, then used it to orchestrate real estate fraud." She slid a document across the table. "This is a list of properties she claimed were under her management. 27 addresses, only 6 of them were ever foreclosed. The rest were occupied or privately owned." I scanned the list. One of them was my place. "You're on here," she added, "with a note that says inactive owner subject to HOA control pending reassignment." My stomach turned. She didn't just fake leases. She was preparing to seize homes. "Worse," Reva said. "We found a spreadsheet on her laptop labeled redistribution plan. It divided the neighborhood into zones and assigned names to each, like she was running a private land grab. It was surreal, like something out of a dystopian novel." I leaned back, trying to absorb it. "She ever mention a partner?" Reva shook her head. "Not yet, but we traced some of the rental payments to a second account held in the name of a shell company. We're investigating it now." That night, I installed a new wireless camera on my porch. Not because I felt unsafe, but because I'd learned how easily someone could twist reality when no one's watching. I also started making copies of everything, every letter, every call log, every transaction. I wasn't just protecting myself anymore. I was building a case. The next day, I got a call from Camille. "They served me with a subpoena," she said, voice shaky. "For what?" "They want me to testify in the grand jury hearing. They said I might have seen or heard something that connects Cheryl to the shell company." I paused. "Did you?" "There was a phone call," she said slowly. "Back in March. Cheryl was talking to someone on speakerphone. I was dropping off a rent check. They were discussing routing payments through a management group to avoid liability." "What was the name of the group?" "I can't remember the whole thing, but I think it had the word harbor in it. I called Alvarez that afternoon and relayed everything. He didn't sound surprised. "We just tied Harbor Line Holdings to a P.O. box in Clearwater," he said. "Registered to a woman named Danielle Zimmerman. Family?" I asked. "Cousin, accountant, she's already lawyered up." The case was getting deeper. Cheryl hadn't just been acting alone, she had an accomplice with financial savvy, someone who could launder rent payments and make everything look clean on paper. We weren't dealing with a petty HOA tyrant anymore. This was organized fraud. By the following week, subpoenas had gone out to 5 more residents. 3 of them had unknowingly signed contracts that were processed through Harbor Line. One of them, a young teacher named Sal, had even received eviction threats when he questioned a sudden rent increase. She told me if I didn't comply, the HOA would seize the property and blacklist me from future ownership, Sal said during a community meeting. Like she had that kind of power. Residents started showing up with copies of altered documents. Some had entire pages swapped out from the originals. One woman found her own signature forged on a lease renewal she never agreed to. The sheriff's office set up a satellite desk in the community center just to handle the volume of complaints. Riva called me again and asked if I'd be willing to testify at the preliminary hearing. I agreed. The courthouse was packed when I arrived. Cheryl sat at the defense table wearing a beige suit and a look of forced indifference. Her lawyer, a lean man with slicked-back gray hair, kept whispering in her ear. Beside them sat Danielle Zimmerman, hands clasped, eyes darting like she was scanning for exits. When I took the stand, the prosecutor, a tall woman named Lorna Chase, walked me through the events chronologically. I stuck to the facts. When she asked how I discovered the fraud, I said, "She called me a squatter on my own property. That got my attention." Lorna smiled faintly and nodded. Then came the documents, deed history, tax records, lease forgeries, payment trails. Camille's testimony followed mine, then Art's, then Sal's. Each one added a new thread to the web. By the end, Cheryl looked like she was trying to disappear into her chair. The judge ruled that there was sufficient evidence to proceed with charges on multiple counts, including grand theft, wire fraud, conspiracy to defraud, and unlicensed real estate activity. Danielle's bail was set at twice Cheryl's. Neither of them spoke as they were led out of the courtroom. Back in Maple Creek, things didn't go back to normal, but they did go forward. The county officially dissolved the false HOA. An independent firm was hired to audit every transaction made under Cheryl's fake management. Residents who had been defrauded were connected with legal aid and title resolution services. The community center became a hub for rebuilding, not just structurally, but socially. One afternoon, I stood outside with Art, watching as a new property marker was staked into his lawn. "Feels like we're starting over," he said. "We are," I replied. "But this time we're doing it with our eyes wide open." He gave a small nod, then looked out at the rest of the street. The yards were still a little rough, the sidewalks cracked in places. But there was a new energy, people helping each other, sharing updates, comparing notes. The illusion of control Cheryl had built was gone, and in its place, something real was starting to grow, not fear, not silence, something like community. By early May, the county had completed its audit of Maple Creek, and the extent of the damage made the local evening news. The story ran with a drone shot of our neighborhood, paired with the headline, "HOA Fraud, County Uncovers Elaborate Property Scheme in Maple Creek." Cheryl's mugshot flashed on the screen for a full 3 seconds. I'd parked myself on the couch that night with a spiral notebook in my lap, cataloging every resident who'd been affected. 32 homes had been compromised, either through forged leases, fake purchase agreements, or undisclosed charges. But it wasn't until the news segment aired that something new dropped into my lap. A man named Ruben called me the next morning, said he used to be on the original HOA board before Cheryl bulldozed it. "She called an emergency vote when most of us were out of town," he said. "Then sent out letters saying we'd resigned. I only found out when the landscapers stopped showing up." "Did you vote her in?" I asked. "Never. She appointed herself president through a document I never signed, and I was the treasurer." I asked him to meet me at the community center later that day. When he arrived, He brought a battered accordion folder filled with board meeting notes, payment ledgers, and copies of the original bylaws. Everything stopped in 2018, right when Cheryl had claimed the HOA needed to modernize. She changed all this without legal authority, I said, flipping through the bylaws. This version doesn't even mention rentals. She told people we were dissolved, Ruben said. But we never filed termination paperwork. She just outlasted us one by one. I called Riva immediately. Within 2 days, the state issued a cease and desist against Cheryl's entire operation, citing fraudulent representation of a legal entity. That's when the second shoe dropped. The prosecutor's office announced that Cheryl and her cousin Danielle were now being charged under the state's racketeer, influenced corrupt organization statute, RICO. Apparently, the feds had been watching the case since the first forged lease was reported. I was summoned to testify again, this time in federal court. The courtroom was colder, more sterile. The judge wore glasses on the tip of his nose and didn't interrupt once during the 5-hour hearing. This time, the evidence was heavier. Bank records, sworn affidavits from over 20 residents, and internal emails recovered from Cheryl's laptop. One message, dated 7 months earlier, read, "If we spread out the transfers through the Harbor Group, no one will trace it. Keep the leases under 6 months to avoid triggering landlord reporting." That sealed it. Intent was established. Camille testified again, this time less nervous. She gave a detailed account of a meeting Cheryl had held in her living room with 2 other tenants. They were discussing how to encourage non-compliant residents to vacate. Cheryl had suggested issuing backdated violation notices and fining them into submission. The prosecutor leaned on that hard. She weaponized the illusion of authority, the prosecutor said during closing arguments. She used the structure of a homeowners association as a front for a sophisticated and deliberate criminal enterprise. By the end of the week, Cheryl and Danielle were both convicted on multiple counts: wire fraud, conspiracy, real estate fraud, and racketeering. Cheryl was sentenced to 12 years. Danielle, who had cut a plea deal, received 5 and agreed to cooperate fully with restitution efforts. The court ordered the liquidation of all Cheryl's assets, including the beach condo in Sarasota and the Mercedes she'd bought last fall paid for, apparently, with HOA fees. In the following weeks, the neighborhood finally started healing. The county helped set up a restoration fund using part of the seized assets. Victims got partial reimbursements. Camille received full compensation for her rent and relocation costs. Art recovered his down payment with interest, and Sal. He was finally able to get his name on an actual deed, this time with a real notary and a real attorney. As for me, I was approached by the interim trustee with an offer. Help draft a new neighborhood charter from scratch, not as a volunteer, but as a paid consultant. "You're the only one who's read every document front to back," she said. "You want to help make sure something like this never happens again." I accepted. Over the next 2 months, we held open forums in the community center. No more backroom decisions, no more fake votes. Every homeowner got a say. We drafted a new charter that banned rental management through any third-party group not licensed by the state. We installed a rotation system for board seats, mandated public records access, and created a digital complaint log that could be viewed by any resident. At the final vote to ratify the new charter, every single household showed up. Even the elderly couple on the corner who hadn't left their house in 3 years made it out. It passed unanimously. After the vote, I stood outside under the string lights we'd hung between the oaks and watched neighbors laughing, talking freely. For the first time in years, there were no whisper campaigns, no threats of violation letters, no clipboard patrols. Camille walked up beside me holding 2 plastic cups of lemonade. She handed me one. "You ever think we'd get here?" she asked. "Not a chance," I said. "But now we're here, I don't think anybody's going to let it slip back." "Ruben said you turned down a seat on the new board." "I did." "I don't want a title, I just want my house, my street, and my neighbors to be safe," she nodded. "Well, we owe you that much." From across the lawn, Ruben waved. Art was helping string up more lights. Sal was showing off his new grill to a group of teenagers. It was subtle but unmistakable. The neighborhood had reorganized itself not around control, but around trust. A week later, I received a final envelope from the prosecutor's office. Inside was a letter confirming that the last of Cheryl's fraudulent leases had been voided and expunged from the county records. My property was once again mine alone, legally and publicly. I framed the letter and hung it in the hallway, not out of spite, but as a reminder. People like Cheryl thrive when no one questions them, when homeowners don't ask to see the bylaws, when tenants don't verify who they're writing checks to, when neighbors stop looking out for each other. But not in Maple Creek, not anymore, and definitely not on my watch.